The Lieutenant Governor can field a few questions, so we have a microphone here, and we'd like you to maybe come up to the mic and address your question. It's about 8:25, go for about 15 minutes or so. Thank you.
Hi, Mayor.
That's terrific what you just said, and I hope it comes true. And all of us will try to help it come true. But there is one thing on the side that's like a thorn in our side, and that's funding of public education, which never seems to get resolved. And if you're in the first suburbs of Cleveland, the taxes connected with those schools, keeping them going, is really killing us. So I don't know what, I personally do not know what the answer is. I've gone to 4 million meetings, but we haven't resolved the thing. So I know that isn't yours, and we should have Eric Schumer out here for that one. But you can carry the message. Maybe you have some answers.
Okay. Well, first let me say that I first met Mayor Rothschild 29 years ago when I was running for the House of Representatives, and I was hoping to be able to represent many of your suburbs, including University Heights. And although she's a little shorter than me, she completely intimidated me and still does. There is no person in America, now that my mother-in-law has passed away, of whom I am more scared than Burl Rothschild. And if you knew Mary's own, my mother-in-law, she was only about an inch taller. I also have to tell you a story. But you may think I'm evading your question. I'm not. I just need to like to tell stories first. 28 years ago, Burl and I are different parties, as you probably know. And I was going to the University Heights Democratic Ward Club. I don't think Burl's ever heard this story, so I thought I'd tell you this because you just reminded me. And I had not given many speeches in my life. And I was a nervous wreck, and it was one of these snowy nights in Cleveland, blizzard conditions. I arrive at the University Heights Ward Club about 45 minutes late. I walk into the room. It's about a little smaller than this, and there are lines of chairs, about maybe 20 lines of chairs. I walk in. The room's completely empty except for one man in his mid-80s in the 8th row. I said, "Where is everybody?" He said, "You were late. People didn't want to wait." I said, "Well, I'm embarrassed. I really apologize, but could you do me a favor? I am so nervous. Would you mind if I just go up to the podium and give this speech and just tell me how I do, and I'll be back next week. I'll be on time for the club." He said, "I don't care. Go ahead." So I get up and I read the speech word for word, and it seems like it goes on forever. Maybe 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, I'm done. He's still sitting there. I said, "Sir, thank you. I cannot thank you enough for having listened to my speech and been so patient." And he gets up, and I'll never forget what he says. He said, "Son, don't thank me. I'm the next speaker." You just reminded me of that story, bro. I can't explain, because it was the University Heights Democratic Ward Club. Now, because the plain dealer's here, I do want to say for the record I've embellished the story. But most of it is true. Anyway, I think it's fair to say that we all know that the way we fund our schools is still in need of great improvement. That because we rely so heavily on the property tax, we have a problem that where in Ohio you grow up often determines unfairly where in life you end up. And it should not depend on the property wealth, whether it's commercial or residential, of your district. And therefore, Governor Strickland and I recognize that the state has an increasing responsibility to the people of the state to reduce our reliance on the property tax and for the state to increase its role in funding our schools. But Governor Strickland and I feel equally strongly that if that's all we do, we have missed the boat. That we must tie any changes in school funding to school reform, and to make sure that we have what Governor Strickland often calls child-centered learning, where education revolves around the child rather than the other way around, which is often happens. So what the governor has said is that the first thing we need to do is have accountability. He said, if you want me to really do something fundamental in primary and secondary, like I have done in early childhood education and like I've done in higher education, then give me the responsibility and the accountability to do so, because right now the governor doesn't have that. It's why in our administration, one of the first things we did was say, if you want to reverse the disinvestment in higher education, if you truly want to make higher education a signature in this state, then have the chancellor not accountable to an anonymous board of regents, but to the elected governor of this state. And now Chancellor Fingerhut, because of legislation that we proposed, is a member of the cabinet as accountable to the governor, not to the board of regents. Not a single one of you could name a member of the board of regents today. Well, the same thing has to be done in primary and secondary education. How many of you can name your state school board member? They're good people, but you can't. Very few people can. The truth of the matter is that if you want true accountability, the accountability must be to the highest elected person in the state whose name you do know, and that's Ted Strickland. Now, with accountability comes responsibility, but if you want us to have the responsibility, give us the accountability. It makes absolute no sense whatsoever to me to say that higher education should be accountable to the governor, but primary and secondary education should not. Now, the critics say, but we're going to politicize primary and secondary education. Well, in that case, maybe we shouldn't have elected officials. Have we politicized higher education? Have we politicized economic development? Have we politicized mental health? Have we politicized alcohol and drug dependency? I don't think so. We have a democracy in which we elect people and we hold them responsible. Why should primary and secondary education be any different than any of the other responsibilities of state government? The answer is it should not. So, Burl, I recognize that that's only one piece of an answer to a much more difficult question. But I will tell you that I think the governor has once again been bold by saying, yes, we need to reduce our reliance, but before we come up with a plan, which we will do, let's deal with first things first, and let's deal with the ultimate accountability. And with all due respect to the elected state school board, and with all due respect to Superintendent Zellman, who, by the way, is a great educator and is a great person, the fact that neither of them are responsible to the governor is wrong-headed and misguided and counterproductive to reforming our schools and solving the school funding problem. Now, having said that, the governor, despite that lack of accountability, made a step in the right direction, because this last budget we shifted responsibility again more towards the state. And under Governor Strickland's administration, for the first time, through a combination primarily of providing property tax relief to every senior in this state, to every senior homeowner in this state, we have shifted responsibility from going to about 48% state support to 52%. For the first time, we've gone over the 50% level.